All right. So we're going to try to do week 2, and we're going to try to teach a lesson on the balance of cells. I hope you guys can see this. You have this accessible in your drive, your Google Drive, under your biology folder. You have these Google Slides. There's 29 of them. There is a 9-page packet that goes with them. And I also have 2 Ed puzzles that go with them. Your Ed puzzles should be on your Ed puzzle account when you click into Mrs. Bond. So looking at slide 1 is homeostasis, and I'm going to click it into view format. And homeostasis is the internal balance, and we keep our balance internally maintained in the cell. This is the process of transport. So some things will come in and some things come out of the cell, and it's a selection process that's made through the cell. Now, how do we decide? This is called the cell membrane. Here's a picture of it. This is also called a double fat layer. You could see the fat layer here. This is the first one, the first line of blue. Here is the second line of blue. That's 2 double fat layer. Also, you can see that these little greens are moving, and so are the little oranges that are moving, and this is known as selective. So it says what is selected to go in and out of the cell depending on what the cell needs. And we call this model the fluid mosaic model. Here's that double layer of fat, that bi-layer, 2 layers of fat. And this is a protein, and that protein allows certain things in and out of the cell. The inside of the cell is labeled here. It's orange. The outside is blue. Okay, so when molecules move in and out of the cell, they move in 2 different ways. The first is called passive. The second is called active. The difference between passive and active is active has ATP. If you look at that picture, ATP means that active transport has energy. And it kind of sounds like, when you say active, it kind of sounds like it needs energy. When you're active, you need energy. So active transport needs energy. Now, the opposite of active is passive. So passive needs no energy, they just move. Now, these processes of moving cells are 2 different types. There's ones that are just called simple diffusion, that it just moves across the cell. And the second is facilitated diffusion, where it has to move through one of these protein channels in the cell membrane. So 2 different types, passive and active transport. Passive transport, let's talk about that one first. That has no energy, does not require energy, just moving across the cell membrane. Now, there's 2 types of passive transport. The first is simple diffusion, where it's moving across the cell membrane. And the second is from our lab from last week that we looked at, and that's osmosis, and that's more specific for just water. That's what we looked at with the egg. And the egg, we could see that the water was moving back and forth because it was getting larger, and then it was shrinking down. And that's because the water was moving in and out. Diffusion, if I was in class, I would show you diffusion in a beaker, and we could put a little bit of food dye, and that food dye disperses out, and that dispersion is diffusion. It's going to go from where there's a high concentration of it, and it's going to spread out and into a lower concentration until it reaches what we call equilibrium, where it's spread out throughout. Now, diffusion is very often used when we talk about salts. So compartment A has a lot of salts. Compartment B has very few salts. So the salts are going to move from where there is many to where there is few, where there is many to where there is few, until step 3, the process of equilibrium, where things are balanced, right? Homeostasis, balanced. Simple diffusion, moving in from a higher concentration. If you look here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, there's a bunch, and there's 0. So diffusion is where it's going from a lot to a few, a lot to a few. That is simple diffusion. Remember, it does not require energy. No energy required. And when that equilibrium is met, that means that it is balanced. So take a look at this example of diffusion. Lots, not many at all. Then it crosses. When it crosses, that's diffusion. It moves from where there's a high concentration to where there's a low concentration, and it requires no energy. High concentration, low concentration requires no energy. High concentration, oh, look at that, equilibrium. Okay, now it is balanced. If you take a look at this example, you can see 1, 2 oxygens inside of the cell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outside of the cell. Diffusion is going to take those 5 and it's going to move some in. It requires no energy. Here is a motion. Ooh, equilibrium. So it starts out with 10 fish and 0 fish, and then it moves 5 fish on both sides. So now it's equilibrium, and that's where it's equal parts. Okay, so 5 and 5, equilibrium, that's diffusion. I'm going to stop there and talk about osmosis in the next video. Please look at the video below on diffusion